55 northbound between River Road and Blodgett. There's slow traffic with ongoing road construction. The roadway is reduced down to one lane. The Stevenson inbound between Ashland and the Dan Ryan, you have slow traffic. 355 to Lakeshore Drive is 28. From the Tri-State is 19. You have a heavy ramp to the inbound Dan Ryan. The Dan Ryan inbound between 18th and Roosevelt seeing slow ups, and that's due to road construction in the right lane. 95th Street to downtown is 16. Spring Street east of McLean, that accident has been cleaned up. And the Eden, still delay-free in either direction, coming in on the Kennedy 20 minutes from O'Hare to downtown. That's traffic. I'm Julie Cronus.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. AM 560 Weather Center forecast, sunshine, highs in the upper 80s, clear overnight, lows in the mid-60s. 67 at O'Hare. Next news coming up at 7. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com.
Trump in Wisconsin, in Iowa, in Pennsylvania, tackling substantive issues as well as doing the politicking one would expect of a candidate for the President of the United States, 70 days out from the election. And there's a lot to discuss, too, on this, too, where the intersection of politics and policy, which is omnipresent, but particularly so with matters like the post office conspiracy theorizing that has reached fever pitch this week, as well as with the running debate over mail-in voting, not to mention the more pedestrian matters a president may deal with that may not be important nationally to the D.C. press corps, but are important to people in Iowa when it comes to things like help after storms created significant damage. For more on all this, we're pleased to be joined by Ben Williamson. He's the Deputy Assistant to the President, Senior Advisor to the COS, and Senior Communications Advisor. Ben, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you both. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, why don't we start with his tromping through the Midwest this week, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Pennsylvania, some different chores at hand in each state, beginning with Iowa and disaster relief for Cedar Rapids and surrounding areas after the storms that were inflicted upon that state, that community.
Well, it was great to be in Iowa this week, and the way the trip came together was sort of quintessential President Trump. I believe he spoke on the phone with Senator Ernst from Iowa, and decided last minute he wanted to go see the people of Iowa and assess things on his own. We would have been there a day earlier, actually, if Secret Service had let him go, but we had to run security protocols, make sure. So I think we got there on Tuesday. This week it was, and you're right. It was assessing the situation after the storm went through. Obviously, the people of Iowa have been in our prayers. The 3 people that died, and the over 50 that have been injured, I believe. And we're continuing to work with our local teams on the ground. The president signed a disaster relief declaration approving funds to help fix some of the damage that occurred there. We're continuing to work with our teams on the ground and the 2 senators, as well as Governor Reynolds in Iowa, to make sure that we can provide all the assistance possible to make sure we help Iowans get back on their feet after the storm.
In Joe Biden's speech last night, he didn't mention looters or civil unrest in certain cities. And I think that some Americans are waking up that, if you vote for Trump, it's law and order. If you vote for Biden, it's more of the same of what's going on right now. How important and how will that play out in key states like Minnesota?
Well, Amy, there were quite a few things he didn't mention. You're absolutely right. I heard he didn't mention China as well, which is quite interesting given we're dealing with a coronavirus that came from China. But mysteriously missing from that speech was also looters, rioters, and violence in cities like Portland. You're absolutely right. And it's going to become critical over the next 3 months. People are really going to be assessing what's going on, who stands for law and order. And when they look, I think it'll be clear that that's what this president stands for. There's been a real failure, not just on the part of Joe Biden, but on the part of many mainstream Democratic candidates or politicians as a whole, to fail to distinguish between peaceful protests and violent rioters. And what we're seeing in cities like Portland, cities like Minneapolis, places like Seattle, goes well beyond the realm of First Amendment protected peaceful protesting. This is violence It needs to be addressed as such. And at the end of the day, if we're not standing up for law and order, if we're not supporting our police officers who are responding to actions like this, that's wholly unacceptable. This president knows that, and he'll continue to be standing up for that.
And so, is he thinking about revisiting dispatching more federal law enforcement, or even doing something more substantial in cities that continue to be afflicted by lawlessness, like Portland? I mean, we're 3 months in Portland, and there was the promise made by the governor of Oregon there, Kate Brown, that I'm going to send state police to backstop the local police in Portland to bring some peace to the residents and businesses in Portland. Well, that hasn't really happened, or at least that peace hasn't been affected. And of course, we have similar problems in other cities around the country. So is this something that he's monitoring in terms of whether or not to intercede with federal resources more aggressively?
He is absolutely monitoring, Dan, and it's certainly on the table. I wish I had news to break on your show this morning as far as what we're planning on doing at this point. I don't. But what I can briefly tell you, Amy, and your listeners is, as far as what exactly we're doing to monitor the situation briefly, we actually have a task force set up here at the White House, made up of the FBI director, Attorney General Barr, the Department of Homeland Security, the National Guard. They monitor situations like what's occurring in Portland around the country, and they compile a report every day for the chief of staff, my longtime boss, Mark Meadows. And they review it and essentially decide what needs to be done from there. Secretary Wolf has done a great job making sure that we have all the data, making sure that we're monitoring different violent outbreaks across the country. And when we're needed to respond, this president's going to be there. He said consistently he wants local law enforcement to take the lead. He wants state and local governments to be the leaders on that. But if they're not willing to protect their people, he's willing to do it for them. So no action items right now to announce, but we are certainly monitoring the situation and fully prepared to act if need be.
Hey, when you get Christopher Wray, when you're in the same room with him, can you tell him to turn over the documents to Ron Johnson that he's been requesting so that we can get on with that? Can you pass that word over to him about Ron Johnson? I don't know. Yeah.
I will pass that word on, and I would love nothing more. You're preaching to the choir, my friend.
Yeah, I'm sure I am. So here's the thing about COVID-19 relief, and is there going to be a phase 4, or should Americans expect that the president's executive actions from the other week is going to be about it between now and November?
We're working hard on that, Dan. I'm becoming more and more optimistic that we're going to hit some kind of deal. The speaker did express some openness to sort of stripping down their original demands and going with more relief-tailored items. The president certainly wants to do things like send stimulus checks, give small businesses financial relief, protect people from evictions. And we're also certainly looking at things like unemployment insurance. Funding the post office is important to him. He wants to do that too. Originally, Democrats were set on keeping things like the repeal of the SALT tax on the table, which is obviously a cap on taxes or local taxes for folks making over $200,000, usually in blue states, and things like state and local bailouts where they send money to state and local governments. They were at about $1 trillion for that money, which is too high for the president and for Senate and House Republicans. But we're optimistic. We're hopeful that we can hit some kind of a deal. We're going to keep working hard. The president did signed, I think, 4 executive orders, and those orders have done well as far as meeting needs. But at the end of the day, we always want to work through legislation if we can. So we're going to keep coming back to the table, keep trying to work with Democrats and doing our best to deliver relief for the American people.
Ben, yesterday, President Trump deemed teachers and staff essential. Music to the ears of a lot of parents who we really need our kids back in class. How hard is he going to hit that during his speech in the RNC next week? And what exactly does it mean now that they have been deemed essential?
Well, he's going to be harping on it quite a bit. You're absolutely right. It's a very important topic. We do need to open up the schools. This president has been a leader on that message from the get-go. Your economy can't really get going until the schools are back open. As we've heard loud and clearly from parents across the country, we've heard their voices very loudly here at the White House. It's been great. But I think more importantly than just the fact that it gets the economy going is that the data really shows that we can do this safely. We can get kids back to school in a safe way. Our data shows that kids really aren't the drivers of this virus. You've got medical experts from all over the country weighing in and saying so. The American Association of Pediatrics endorsed opening back up schools in person On NBC even, you had a segment where they were interviewing 5 pediatricians recently about whether or not kids should go back to school. All 5 pediatricians on the segment said, I would send my kids back to school in person. And so that's the kind of data that we're looking at. Kids really aren't driving the virus. We think it's important to get them back in the classroom, make sure that we listen to the needs of those parents. And you'll be hearing the president talk quite a bit about that. And like you mentioned just briefly, teachers are essential. They are so critical to what we do as a country. The president made that decision this week, and we'll see what happens ultimately with states and localities, hoping they follow suit and start to open up their schools safely.
And is he going to make school choice central to his messaging on reopening, as well as to any sort of deal on Phase 4 COVID-19 relief? I know the Senate proposal, $105 billion for reopening schools, 10% of that for scholarships for families that, at a certain income level, so they could have the same choices as families that are wealthier to send their kids to schools elsewhere if their local school is not going to open. It seems to me this is a wonderful opportunity to drive this as the teachers' unions are exercising their dominion over not just the schools, but the lives of the families they're supposed to represent.
Well, as far as where school choice plays in legislation, we'll see what happens on that. But more importantly, on the broad point, you're absolutely right, Dan. School choice is so critical, especially in this moment where you have different pockets of schools opening up across different states. I love what the president has consistently said from day one on this. He says the money should follow the child. Federal money we send out.
Follow the child. And that's
right.
Follow the child, some things that people have been saying for 20 years. But I like actually his sort of improvement on it. Money should follow the child, not the union. That really nails it. That sticks the landing.
You're absolutely right. And he's been harping on that from day one. The money should follow the child, not the unions. And that's what we really want to do, is make sure that we're sending the money where it should go to families that would rather send their child to perhaps a different school than where they're located. The president's always said a classic line, but your zip code shouldn't control the quality of your education. We want to make sure that parents have the choice of where to send their kids to school, and the money should follow the child from a federal standpoint. So we'll see where that falls in legislation, but it's very critical to the president, very critical to this White House, and critical to families all over the country.
Is he going to continue to beat the rhetorical drum, as it were, for reopening the economy? There's only so much he can do, or probably even should do, at the state or local level when it comes to deciding whether this business district opens up or this one doesn't. But he certainly can use the bully pulpit.
Well, for your listeners, there's no one more eager to get the country back open and to get people back to work than this president. He's been aggressive in terms of trying to make it easier for people to get back to work, cutting taxes, removing barriers from small businesses for rehiring, making sure that small businesses have funds to keep afloat while we had to go in a brief lockdown. The president is chomping at the bit to get the economy back open. And I think alongside that, what we can also say is we can do this safely, folks. We can get back to work in a world where coronavirus exists and do it safely. For your listeners, we are so much more and so much better prepared from a federal standpoint to deal with a pandemic now than we were in March and April. It is night and day. The cupboard was bare as far as medical equipment, as far as testing supplies, PPE, masks, gloves. That's been changed overnight, essentially. We are now in a much better place from a preparation standpoint to treat something like coronavirus, to manage it. And so we're very confident that we can not only get people back to work, get people back into the economy, into the job market, but do so safely and keep people safe in a world where coronavirus exists until we get a vaccine and can knock it out once and for all.
He is Ben Williamson, Deputy Assistant to the President, Senior Advisor to Mark Meadows, Chief of Staff, and Senior Communications Advisor as well. Ben, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you both. Appreciate the time. Good to be with you.
Yep, thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer.